Well, tell me, mama, what's going on? Tell me, darling, what's going on?
Welcome back, everybody. Bacon and Egg Show, episode number 54, June 6, 2021. Guys, how we doing? Mike, it's great to have you back.
Hey, great
I know
to be
that
back.
guy. He's back.
Yeah, you've seen me in person too, so
That's right. Yeah, no kidding. No, getting to talk a little bit in person was definitely a change of pace. But that was great. Yeah, no, thanks for coming on. We talked about you maybe coming on this week with the break in Austin FC action, and get you on to, because recruiting season's ramping up here, and wanted to get you on to talk a little bit about that. So, but I know we have somewhere to stop before we get to the recruiting. So, Kerry, where are we going to open up today?
Yeah, it's baseball postseason for the college game. We're here. We've been, last week we discussed regional play, getting ready to start, and previewed that just a little bit. The Sluggin Horns have been everything is advertised in this regional tournament so far. Opened up with a massive win over Southern, followed that up with a 10-3 win last night over Arizona State, and are a win away now from going to the. I hear the animals in the back there. Went away from going to the super regional, hosting a super regional. So, which we'll get to what that matchup might be in the super regional in a minute. But guys, let's talk about how the Horns have looked in these first two games.
Yeah, I mean, it's just an impressive start. Like we mentioned last week or last show that the conference tournament, to me at least, it didn't mean a ton that they didn't win that, go and win the conference tournament. They had everybody lined up in terms of their regular rest, having everybody ready to go on the days they're supposed to go. And Coach Pierce would have everybody ready to go for this regional, like a pretty favorable regional when you look at the teams that are here in Austin. And but Texas is, takes care of business. What you have to do as the number 2 overall seed coming into the postseason, you host your regional, you show up, you take care of business from the start, and that's what they've done. There's never been any doubt in either one of these games what the outcome was going to be, and that's sort of what you want to see and what you expect to see out of the number 2 overall ranked seed, like I said. So, Mike, anything stood out to you out of these first couple of games?
I think what stood out, obviously, is the pitching. So obviously one of the best pitching staffs in the nation. So anytime you have, 2 or 3 guys that can go out and get 7 innings and kind of dominate, obviously that's going to put you in a great position. Also, obviously one of the better defensive teams in the nation as well. So you put those 2 things together, that's a recipe for success in baseball. I think some of the concerns still are out there. Base running just continues to be an issue. I don't know who's coaching base running, but if Augie Garrido was here, I'm pretty sure there'd be some funny YouTube videos on this stuff, because it's just kind of out of control at this point.
How can you do that?
Seriously.
What are you doing?
So that's a little bit of a concern.
Forget about this in 10 minutes. Sorry, I couldn't help it. I love that rant, man. I love that audio.
That's beautiful. Multiple rants.
Yeah.
But I think that, that could be an issue going forward if these outs are precious the farther you go in the tournament. So you got to kind of clean that up. And it's always come down to the timely hitting. I know I was on the show, I think a month back, just, kind of wondering if this team was going to, have enough offense. It looks like, you have some big hitters in this lineup, obviously with Zubia, hitting that home run last night. So, I think offensively, as long as you get some timely hitting and you just cut down on the strikeouts, that's really the main. Just put the ball in play. A lot of college baseball is just getting the ball in play. Make the defense. I think what Arizona State had a couple of errors last night. So it's just put the ball in play. Good things will tend to happen. So obviously they get those couple of things cleaned up. Obviously, they should be one of the favorites going in. Obviously if you get past the super regional.
Yeah, and in terms of that super regional, I know we're not there yet. Texas still has to win another game, and there's still left, plenty of baseball left to be played in Gainesville. But the Florida Gators were eliminated this weekend. The host there, South Florida, just put it on them, and Miami lost, and it's looking like South Florida is the kind of the leader right now to get out of that regional. And you don't ever want to say like, oh, well, God, bring them on. Like that would be, I think, what was it, Tennessee Tech a few years ago when it was like, that was actually, pretty
Fresno
good matchup
State.
there. Yeah, exactly. Like you don't want to kind of wish for, oh yeah, that'd be great. Well, hell, they beat Florida. I mean, Florida's. Do you want the team that just, boat race Florida in their own regional to be coming into your house next? But still,
Yeah.
it's not facing the Florida Gators. But yeah, they're looking pretty good, man. I mean, that's what I think there was a little bit of a question over the pitching selection Friday, not going with Ty Madden to start the first game of the regional. But in retrospect, that looks like a pretty savvy move by David Pierce to have Ty Madden go for the Saturday matchup against Arizona State. No disrespect to Southern, but I don't think David Pierce was too concerned about what his squad was going to do against Southern in that opening game. And Stevens pitched to Jim. That was just, and he's quick. He's a quick worker too. They kept mentioning that on the TV broadcast about how fast he gets through. I think that game was over in about 2 hours. Like it just was just breeze through. So they're looking great. What do you guys want to see today in the matchup? Obviously go 1-0 and not have to worry about playing a elimination.
Just go 1-0.
Just go 1-0 today.
Just gotta
right?
go 1-0 today, guys. Okay, it's not that
Man.
hard. Can we just do it? Just go.
I was
1-0.
wondering how long it was going to take before a Herman reference was made, and we're just maybe it was a little longer than I was thinking, but here we are.
I want to go back to something real quick that Mike brought up about the pitching, and it's not just the starting pitching. No, when Tanner Witt comes in out of the bullpen last night, and it gives you 3 strong innings, gives up that 2-run home run right in the middle of that, and then from that point on, the crowd got behind him, his teammates got behind him, and he just shut it down after that and put any thoughts of a rally to rest. Any thoughts that they were going to have to bring somebody else out of the bullpen to rest. I mean, that was a key spot for him to be able to fight through that and to be able to go ahead and finish out that game. That was really, really big in terms of what they have in their back pocket for today to be able to use. So super, super key point there from the bullpen and the starting pitching as well. And like you said, Kerry, they weren't really particularly worried about Southern. So with Coach Pierce being able to have everybody extended and work that schedule out exactly how he knew he wanted to have it, that was such a key part, I think, in being successful early on in this regional. But again, you just take care of business when you're this high of a seed. Something that Florida, who although they weren't a top 8 seed, they were the number one. They were like the overall consensus, like slam dunk number 1 team coming into the season. So I think they were 14th or 15th in terms of overall ranking. But to be able to go up and get 19 put on you, it wasn't the worst score of the day. I think Notre Dame put up 26 on somebody. But still, to be able to go 0-2 in your own regional, like that's what you need to avoid as one of those top seeds going in. They didn't step up and take care of business. They have some things not going in their favor heading into this, but still, Texas did that, and that's what I want to see moving forward. Is don't leave any doubt from the start, like they have in both of these games so far. Just foot on the gas, go for it, and just don't leave any doubt. That's what I want to see today.
Yeah, no breaks. So from 1-0 to all gas, no breaks.
See, it's smooth, man. We're there.
That's a transition.
I'm fully bought into that. And so real quick, that light thing that they have with the all gas, no brakes, that little background they have for pictures, it got me so hyped up. Stark's doing it, man. Stark's doing it. But anyways, back to baseball. Mike, was there anything that you particularly want to see before we move on to recruiting talk? Anything that you want to see out of the Sluggin Horns today?
Yeah, no, just play a solid game. At this point of the season, it's just about, timely hitting and then obviously getting out. So I think the big thing for me is that obviously you got a really good bullpen as well. So just not trying to overwork them going into, the super regional. So hopefully we can get this W today. So that way we're not, obviously put in that situation going into, an elimination game. So I think if you could just get something from the bottom of this order, anything, the 7 through 9,
great point.
Just bonus because obviously with Melendez and Cam, you're gonna get some big hits, and so just anything from that bottom of the order just really changes the dynamic of the Texas offense. So I'm just kind of looking forward to seeing how these guys perform, here as we continue to move forward.
One quick
Yeah,
thing.
and Tico and Daly at the top of that lineup they just set the table so well. And
Yeah.
I was looking at the box score. It was basically like everybody at the top 5 or 6 of the lineup are getting hits, getting on base, scoring runs. And I mean, anything like you said out of the bottom third of the lineup is a huge bonus. Sorry, Kerry, I cut you off.
No, all good. I'm glad you mentioned Antico because I think he's been great, like just throughout this entire regional, just the little things. I was reading a lot about Ardoin behind the plate last night, what he was doing in terms of helping out his pitchers and the way that he manages everything out there. This team they're putting it all together. But what I wanted to mention, like I think having the crowd back. And Jay, you mentioned something about the crowd getting back, the crowd kind of rallying there when it, kind of shut down any chance of a comeback or anything like that for Arizona State. I think that's such a huge point, and how great it is to have like the dish full for postseason baseball. And like, it's just exciting to have.
Yeah.
You can feel the momentum. You can feel
right.
the players feed off of that,
Yeah,
and
you really can.
I think it bodes well for, if the Horns are able to finish the job and get to the super regional, just having that crowd back. And also, I mean, it gets you excited for football season and everything else. Like people are dying to get back into the stadium, and it's exciting. It's a nice old familiar feeling to have back. So glad it's here. So anyway, just wanted to make that note because you mentioned that about the momentum and having, which is an illusion, as we all know. But like, if momentum wasn't an illusion, the crowd basically stopped Arizona State from building any and trying to mount a comeback. So anyway,
that's how scarred we are from that guy. We can't help. It's 2 mentions already, 2 Herman mentions already. This is what in 4 years. That's how deeply he scarred us.
I don't think this will be the last one either on this show today.
Probably not. Yeah, today. Yeah. So, anyways.
Well, let's keep that subject going and let's get into recruiting. June is a huge month on the 40 acres. Not just for like all the postseason stuff going on, but like football recruiting and hell, even some basketball recruiting. But Mike, run away with it here. Tell us what we have to look forward to this June, because this is when we've got official visits happening. The portal is still active. What do we have going on? What do we have to look forward to or to get excited about this month with Texas recruiting?
Yeah, well, if you like recruiting and you've been starving for official visits, just players being able to get back on campus, as we pull up the slide here, biggest storyline for me is that the dead period is over. And man, people are already flying everywhere and driving everywhere and seeing all the campuses. And now you're about to see recruiting really start to pick up. So yeah, it's just an exciting time. I feel like Texas is in a good position with the 22 class. So it'll be interesting to kind of follow this over the next month or two, obviously getting these kids onto campus. And it feels like the weather right now is just not helping. It feels like it's just been raining for, like a month straight. So as we start to obviously get into the summer months, obviously be able to showcase Austin a little bit more. But I think nowadays, recruits are it's not even really about the city anymore. I mean, you look at Tuscaloosa, like who really wants to go to Tuscaloosa? College Station, like who wants to live there? It's more of like,
come on. Come on. You're completely discounting the, the Sirloin Stockade or the
but I think
Golden Corral in Tuscaloosa, man.
It's more about who's going to put you into the league. So I think just coming up with this season, the summertime, if Sark can put it all together, got a chance to really make a splash in 22 and really looking at big things hopefully for 23. So what are you guys kind of thoughts on the dead period being over?
Well,
I'm excited. Like, go ahead, Kerry.
Oh no. It's interesting just in the kind of like coming out of the pandemic, just in the sense of, you mentioned like getting everybody back on campus, and just in the bigger picture aspect of, this is coming up to where they're going to need to start making decisions here pretty quickly about where they're going to go to school. And this might be the first time that they've ever stepped foot on campus, kind of thing, where some previous recruiting classes, that might not be the case in terms of, they're already getting familiar with the campus. They already know, I don't know, getting some more face time with staff and players on the team, where this is interesting. I think, who was it? Evan Stewart, I think, who's, a local, a state recruit, in-state recruit, who decommitted. I think there was something about like having never been on campus before and like committed basically to kind of lock in that spot, not knowing if there was ever going to be any kind of official visits with COVID and those kinds of things. So I might be thinking of a different recruit as well. But we'll get to Evan Stewart a little bit later. But like, yeah, it's just the whole dynamic coming out of the pandemic is fascinating for me. So just in a big picture sense.
Yeah, that was my first thought when we look at all these players, is that these visits that it wasn't even possible for some of these guys. They were freshmen or some of them were that young when they were starting to be looked at by rivals and all these other services and ranked and all that stuff. And when the hype starts and say, well, we can't go anywhere. They're sophomores, so they can't, you know what I'm saying? Like they would have started that process and they couldn't do it. So it's like, when you combine that with the fact that basically the transfer portal this year is a free for all, because some of those guys that were recruited the year before and started last year also had to commit basically sight unseen to some some programs. So like, this is it's even more of an exciting June, because now we're starting to see some of these developments, and not just with the high school players, but the people in the transfer portal too, that could be more of an immediate type of an impact as well. So, but when you look at these guys that are on this slide here, Malik Murphy is obviously the one that stands out the most, that borderline 5-star, depending on who you talk to. But Jaden Blue, the top running back that has decided not to play his senior season and opt out. Is this something for you guys that, obviously, my opinion is that this is the start of a trend that will be happening more and more often. How do y'all feel about a player like of his quality or any quality opting out of their senior year to prepare for their college career?
Kerry?
I'm totally fine with it. I get the criticism. Like I get where people can have an issue with it, but at the end of the day, this is a business decision. As much as we want to think about like, oh, these guys, he's turning his back on his high school buddies and stuff like that. Well, okay. I mean, big deal when he's at Texas in a couple years and, eventually, in his case, hopefully for the NFL, like, do you think that wear and tear that he saved on his body is worth I don't know. He's a running back. He's one of the most positions in the sport, and with the shortest lifespan. And it's not like he like left his high school. He's still going to be going to high school and hanging out with the same buddies and doing all that kind of stuff. I think it's a business decision. I think we are going to see more of it, but I totally understand it. These guys are unofficially, amateur athletes until they get to the National Football League. And, and that could be 4 to 5 years down the road for this guy. And that's a lot of wear and tear, and it's not a guarantee. And if you can do anything to try to maximize that opportunity, you have to do it. But yeah, I think we're going to see more and more of it. I think it's just a product of the system. I think that I'm actually kind of surprised we haven't seen this earlier, to be honest. And it's the system that we have. And if people don't like what he's doing, then maybe the system should change. But that's maybe a conversation for a different day. But what do you guys think, Mike? Especially, I really want to know what Mike thinks following recruiting as close as he does. Like, where do you think this leads?
I mean, to me, I think it's more of his position, because a high school coach will be willing to give this kid 50 carries a game to advance his career. So why is it, not thought of highly if he wants to? He's already done everything he needs to do. Whatever he does this year is not going to change the fact that he's one of the top running backs in the nation. Mm-hmm. So in a position that you were talking about that takes such a beating and has such a short lifespan, what else does he need to do? It's not like he's not going to be training and like working out and things like that. So there's still you can still develop your craft not being on the field. Now, I think some positions like offensive line, like DBs, I think those are, you need to get experience and things like that. There's just a lot of things that you can learn at those, particular positions that, taking an entire year away from the game might be a little more of a challenge. But I think for this kid, a lot of these kids anyways are playing a ton of 7-on-7 anyways. So it's not really a difference of him, not getting repetition and things like that. I think it's a smart move for him. And I think we will see this more going forward. So it'll just be interesting to see. I know a lot of fans are, like, how are you going to keep this guy in the fold and things like that. And I'm just a little confused because when he steps on the campus and he's, running for 1,500 yards, you're not going to have a problem with it then. So just kind of interesting to see. So that's kind of my take on it. But if you look at all the verbal commits here, so you've got 8 in the fold. So we already talked about Murphy, who I think is probably the most important recruit in the class. So we just talked about Jaden Blue, but he also got Armani Winfield, a really highly touted receiver. Zach Swanson, defensive end out of Arizona. Texas, dipping their hands into Arizona again. We see how well that's worked out with some of the last guys to come out of Arizona. Chris Ross, actually one of my favorite recruits. I think he's really more of a high 4-star guy for me if I was rating this guy. I just love this kid's film and his size. So he's a really, really interesting prospect.
Yeah, I was going to say real quick on Ross. He's a guy that we're probably, as he goes into next season and there's more evaluation on him, like this is going to be one of those kind of like recruits that people look back on and say like, God, what a great eval by this staff. Caught him at like as a 3-star and all this thing. Caught him early before he completely blew up his senior year. And, like you mentioned, is probably ends up like a high 4-star. So like great. I feel like that's one of those kind of great finds that's in this class. So.
Yeah. And then you finish up here with Travell Johnson, Arlington, standout at linebacker, Jalen Gilbo, one of the most talented DBs in the state, and then Brian Allen Jr., who going to be in a battle with Alabama, it looks like, to keep his commitment. And there's still a long way to go with all these guys. Obviously, you're never fully sure that this thing is going to stick sometimes with some of these kids. But I think for me, when it comes down to, some of the storylines to kind of follow as we move forward, the line of scrimmage, what are we going to do up front on both sides of the ball? So what are your thoughts on recruiting guys on the offensive line and defensive line?
Well, we've talked about this recently in a group text. It's like we're going to see the skill position players commit to this offense. Now, let's get the big boys in front there to set that line of scrimmage. That to me that's what I would want to see. That's what I'm anxious to see the most is how that develops and how Coach Sarkisian and the rest of the staff really try to hone in on some of those bigger offensive line recruits that we've seen. Even the legacies like the Brockermeyers weren't willing to. So I had to bring it up because that's the sort of, when we're talking about establishing an offensive line, that is a program changer. You get both of those guys. That's like you're setting that foundation to build around for the next 4 years. And what better way to do, what better way to start off a thing that would have been a perfect sort of a scenario. Now you have to look at it and say, okay, who are the next guys to bring in to be able to set that foundation from the start? And that I'm not quite sure, we're seeing a lot of these skill position guys on here, but that's the next biggest step for me. I guess that's the key to success this summer is what do we see on that front? And that's, Mike, you talk about this all the time, like the guys in the trenches, the guys that set those lines of scrimmage on both sides of the ball, how important they are. And we see a Chris Ross, we see a Zach Swanson, those defensive linemen on this graphic here that are verbally committed already. Now let's, looking forward to seeing some offensive linemen and on those top targets to watch right there. Mike, you have a couple names on that list that are pretty intriguing.
Yeah. So are we going to have a repeat of last year? Because it seems like the state the last couple of years has been producing a lot of offensive talent. So, Devin Campbell out of Arlington, a 5-star. What looks like you may be leaning Texas, but you're just never quite sure with the offensive lineman. Cole Hudson out of Frisco, another really good guard prospect. You've got Banks and Dewberry as well that are, some of the best linemen, not just in the state, but in the country that aren't on this slide. But it's going to be a real battle to see. You got to get, I would say 3 to 4 of these guys, but at this point, with the recruiting that it's been in the last couple of years on the offensive line, I think you got to get at least a couple of these guys in. So, Kerry, what are your thoughts on, some of these offensive line prospects?
It's the whole reason you hire Coach Flood from Alabama over onto this staff. That's the whole reason. I mean, that was the main reason the Brockermeyers committed to Alabama. Was because of Kyle Flood and that staff and the development that they did at Bama. And I know it's Bama, but still, it's the same coach. It's the same offensive line coach. So when you commit and say, I committed because of Coach Flood, that's the kind of reputation he has. And I think it's interesting, man, because there seems to be some really good targets, a lot of, some really good linemen in this class, but it kind of has that feeling of like you mentioned, Mike, if you can get 2, like if you can get Devin Campbell and Hudson off this board, I'm feeling much better about it, because I think at that point, recruits in later classes will start to see the development with a guy like Coach Flood on campus, and the way that, they'll get the ball rolling a little bit. Banks and Dewberry, who knows, it's just kind of the way that recruiting's been in the state here recently with, some of these top tier offensive line prospects. But like, man, if you start missing out on Campbell and Hudson, and like, you kind of have to start really finding those deep evals, like these kind of project type recruits.
Yeah, like Sam Cosme.
Well, I mean, that's a great point. It's not to say that these guys can't get to campus and play well and develop if they're not, not being a 5-star recruit. But
what are the odds that it happens? Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, you're gonna have to find a bunch of Sam Cosmes, and those aren't really easy to find.
Exactly.
Well, and what we saw with what happened with him at the NFL draft and his evaluation by pro prospect or pro evaluators was that, he's just so raw. He basically got through all of his time at Texas and was as successful as he was because of his strength here and being able to recover, not because he was taught how to be a proper lineman, but because he was able to overcome a lack of teaching and stuff like that. So that's even, having an offensive line coach with the reputation of Coach Flood on campus, if you didn't get that, I could totally see how the expectations wouldn't be as high right away to come in and get some of these bigger name offensive linemen. But that's almost what, coming in, that Sarkisian is known, like when this hire was made, Mike, the first thing that you told me and Kerry was, like elite recruiter. It wasn't like elite coach. It was elite recruiter. Everything else can come from that. His scheme is obviously successful, but the elite recruiter side of things is what's going to put the Jimmies and the Joes on campus. And then you go from there, and that's how you win national championships. And that's how you're in contention for national championships every year, is because you can't help but be that good because of the guys that you get onto campus every single recruiting cycle. So, that to me is you can't expect another Sam Cosme to come through and develop himself into being a day 2 pick in the NFL draft. The coaches are on campus now to do that. Now let's see if they can get the guys, a Devin Campbell, a Cole Hudson, who was on campus this weekend, I believe. Let's get those guys in the fold and then see what goes from there. But I just wanted to say that because the fact that Cosme was just basically self-made, that's not acceptable.
No, it's not.
That's really crazy. Like that fact that he's where he's at, honestly, having seen the measurables and everything, I'm like, man, that guy has a super high ceiling going into the NFL. It could be a bookend tackle, you know what I mean? Just really interested to see, what we're going to do on this offensive line class. So it's exciting, obviously, but it only gets really exciting once you start getting some of the names on the board. You know what I mean? Other than that, it's more of a fear factor, it seems like. So I think something that could really help with this is going to be out-of-state recruiting. So what's Texas going to do? It seems like we're dipping our hands into the West Coast. Can you get a CJ Williams to come with Malik Murphy, a super talented receiver? If you can bring in, Nui Halamaka, the linebacker as well, who's just on campus this weekend, can you bring him in? That's, these are some of the top 100 players in the country. You got to address some of these concerns on the offensive defensive line, maybe out of state if you're not able to pin down some of these guys, here in the state. So, what are your guys' thoughts on kind of out of state recruiting and what we need to do going forward?
I'm glad you brought up Tui Halamaka.
Yeah.
Kerry. I'm glad you brought up Tui Halamaka because that's like he's right there in terms of ranking behind Murphy in California. Like that's the type of player that he is. And to have him on campus this weekend, what was a big deal? Go ahead, Kerry.
No, I was going to say it's if you're going to go out of state, the University of Texas going out west, that's the way to do it. You don't want to invest all your time trying to recruit a 5-star linebacker out of Baton Rouge because it's like, what are the odds of him actually coming to Texas? When you're battling targets within the SEC territory, all those kinds of things, you're kind of investing a lot of time and energy into battles you might not win. You might get 1 or 2 kind of thing, but like USC is down or, down-ish, and they're kind of going through their own kind of Tom Herman experience right now with, a coach that they kind of want to get rid of, but can't seem to really get rid of quite yet. And so this is the perfect opportunity. Sark has the connections out west. He knows coaches all throughout that state and his time, most of his life out in California and the whole, and out west. So why not capitalize on it? We've seen it with Malik Murphy. You mentioned CJ, go out there and build these pipelines to California. I think it's a lot easier to go to California and Arizona to get recruits to come to Texas than going east and trying to get it to go the other way. So yeah, I'm all for it. I'm all, and especially because, these high school coaches want to get a little sensitive about Texas recruiting out of state, but at the same time, they don't mind sending their players out of state to programs like Oklahoma and Arkansas and LSU and Bama and Florida and on and on and on. So if he goes and recruits if Sark and the staff recruits out of state well, and they start winning games, you start to lock those in-state guys in a little bit more. The ones that were more willing to go out of state are going to be more willing to stay and go to a winning Texas than kind of a middling, kind of mediocre Texas right now at this point. So yeah, I'm all for it. It's a national game now. Why not?
Yeah. I mean, Oklahoma's been doing it and doing it successfully. So, they go all over the place, New York, Nevada. So it's like, they don't care where the players are. They just bring them in. I think for Texas to really bounce back in recruiting, it's going to be guys like Denver Harris and Brennan Thompson, top 10 state guys, elite athletes. I think we're getting the skill guys like Jay mentioned. I think can you lock down the elite of the elite skill guys in the state? So I think that'll be something to watch for. And I think, the last thing here is Malik Murphy's development. Had 6 games in the spring for his high school year, showed, some really good flashes, had some down games. So, obviously recruiting classes almost don't mean anything unless you nail the quarterback. So what are you guys' thoughts on Malik and his development going into this year?
Jay, you want to go for this one? You want to start it off?
I guess it's everything in terms of hitting on that guy. And by all accounts, he looks the part. He looks like he's the guy to step in and be the next whoever. I don't want to compare him to somebody, but he's like, to be able to get a guy like that on campus, to go out of state and get a guy like that on campus that Texas wasn't the only school in his ear. It's just being able to see, and he's sort of playing, and he's not even playing that Pied Piper super role yet, which I think that that's another part about this is, you got to get the quarterback and you got to hit on it. But it always helps if that quarterback in your class is also being like, hey, come play with me. Why don't you come on over to Texas? When the quarterback's doing that, it really sets a tone. I know there's other players that are in this class that are really out there, and it's interesting to see because before, you had your Malik Jeffersons, you had your guys that were really that they expected to have attract guys to campus or whatever, and did a pretty good job. But it's almost like now the type of social media that we're seeing, it's become so, even since Malik Jefferson's days, it's the advancements in how players interact with each other online has increased so much. And so that's what is important to me here is you have these guys that are regarded as some of the top players, not just like you said, Mike, in the state, but in the country. Now, how are they going to turn around now and sort of be that, hey, let's get everybody here to Texas and win a national championship? That's the biggest thing for Murphy, because the tools are all there. I'd like him to be a little bit more verbal in terms of, hey guys, let's all do this. That's really what I want to see from him. I'm not worried about his skill set. I'm not worried about, he looks great in shorts and t-shirt for sure. Seeing him in some of these 7-on-7 campuses just drop campuses, these 7-on-7 events, just dropping dimes in wherever he wants, telling you where he's going to go ahead of the play. You see these videos where he's, okay, I'm going to do this real quick, watch. And then he just drops it in on a dime. And it's like, yeah, this kid's a player. Now let's see some of that. I want to see some of the leadership stuff that I'm sure that he has, that he's just sort of waiting to flex that out.
Well, I think for me with Malik is that how I feel about this quarterback class is gonna have a little bit to do with what happens with the guys on campus now. So like, I think kind of with the skill set that Malik Murphy has, you don't want him to be in a case where he has to, like, because of kind of not playing for a great team out there in California, not having the best kind of like competition and all those kinds of things. He is still kind of raw. He is a little bit of a project for when he shows up at Texas, and you don't want to throw him into the fire or have it in a situation where he's having to be in the fire immediately. So I kind of look at the current quarterback situation on campus and think, if, let's say Casey Thompson wins the starting job, let's see what happens with Hudson Card, because if Hudson Card decides to move on somewhere else, well, that quarterback room just got a little thinner, and the margin between Malik Murphy being the starter, having the time to develop and becoming the starter gets a little bit narrower. Yeah. Where if he can sit behind Hudson Card for a little bit, just in that kind of situation where there's kind of a little bit of staggering to where he can develop a little bit once he gets to Texas, then I'll feel a lot better, much more better about him in this class being the kind of, I hate calling him like a developmental player, but like, he is a little bit of a project, right? He is a little raw.
Yeah, no, definitely. I agree with all those points. It's just going to be interesting to see how he develops into his senior year. So, those are all kinds of things to look for. I know we're about to hit break. So any other final thoughts on Malik?
No, I watched these little clips of him throwing the 10-yard out from the opposite hash, and when you see all of the tools that are there, I'm not like, it's raw, sure, but that's the sort of raw ability. If he's already throwing the 10 or 15-yard outs from the opposite hash and putting it where he wants to put it, like where only the receiver can catch it, those are the types of throws that he's going to have to make in the Big 12 under duress, even. So, like, at any level. So, I agree that he's raw, but I'm not as concerned about that. I just want to see him just stay the course, be a leader, and then get on campus and do whatever he needs to do. I think he'll be the guy.
Well, guys, we're about to take a quick break here. Let's come right back in just a minute. All right, welcome back, everybody. Short break there. Guys, let's wrap up a little bit of Texas football recruiting before we move on. I mentioned Evan Stewart earlier, the 5-star receiver who committed and then decommitted from Texas. Mike, what's the latest you're hearing on this situation? I know he's supposed to be getting on campus this month, I think, right? I think he's on the June official visit list. We talked about the skill positions and how Texas is, there's a ton of those guys, but he's a pretty special player. And when you can get the elite skill position guys, you have to. So where's his recruitment at? Is Texas still in this thing? Is this kind of where are things at as we enter this official visit season?
Yeah, so I think obviously Texas has a couple of huge weekends coming up with a ton of official visits coming in. Evan Stewart being one of those. With Evan Stewart, it's kind of like what we talked about with Brennan Thompson, where it's the elite of the elite. You just pop this guy's film on. He's got next level speed. That's the difference. Would I love to have Devin Duvernay and Colin Johnson, third, fourth round picks? Yeah, I would take those in a heartbeat. But do we want to get back to being Alabama and, LSU and people that are churning out multiple, I think Alabama's had a first round receiver, like it seems like every year for the last like 20
At
years.
At least one.
Like. And then, LSU, if you look back at that team when we played them, it's like, geez, like all those guys are going to be, it seems like stars in the NFL. So, for me, it's like really critical you got to start getting some of these guys in the fold. No different than we talk about the offensive line recruiting. And I think Sark's got to make a huge impression and a huge dent in this thing, to really get these guys in the fold. It was amazing when we got Stewart. I think it only helps having Winfield in the fold. Obviously, he seems all Texas. But you got guys like Quinn Ewers and Caleb Burton still trying to recruit him to Ohio State. I know Alabama's going to be a player. Guys out. Teams out. Everyone wants this kid. Like, who doesn't want this kid? You watch him, and he's like super dynamic. So getting these guys on the campus all together, and really letting Sark go to work and use his pedigree as a recruiter to say like, hey, like, look, we just talked about Alabama and all the receivers that they're putting into the league. Like, this should be the thing that he's showing them. Like, hey, I'm going to put you in a position to be successful, and get you to the next level. So I think, for Evan, it's one of those things where you're going to have to outwork a lot of coaches, because just because he committed early and decommitted, this thing was going to be a battle all the way to the end, even if he stayed as a verbal commit. And you'll see that same thing with, Brian Allen Jr. With Alabama. We're fighting Alabama for a ton of recruits. And that's not a bad thing, but you got to start finishing some of these battles. So what are y'all's thoughts?
Yeah, and that's why you hire Steve Sarkisian, is to be the closer on some of these things. And might not happen immediately, but that's why you hire Steve Sarkisian, is so you can start closing some of these deals. That Stewart was a guy that from the start, like when you look at when you're forming a recruiting class around certain players, he's the type of guy that when you get an early commitment from him, you feel like you can build some momentum around that. I'm not mad at the kid for decommitting, and it's just a part of the process. Like you said, there would have been those talks throughout this entire process, even if he actually didn't say he was decommitting, that we would have heard these anyway, because he's that good. So it's just, it'll be cool to see if they can close this out. If not, where do you go from there? But Stewart, I understand, Kerry, why you wanted to bring this guy back up and spend a little bit more time before we wrapped on recruiting, because he is that special of a player, and it's not a surprise that there's so many other schools that want a piece of this guy. It's good to be in that conversation, at least.
Well, I think
Mike, like you were saying, it's better to be in these fights than not be in them at all.
Yeah, I think the reason the Stewart recruitment is fascinating for me is it kind of represents like the bigger picture of where Texas recruiting is at, because it's like, to get him to commit without being on campus, without seeing this, like how this team is going to look in the fall, tells me a lot about how good of recruiters this staff is, to be able to actually get him to commit initially. And then obviously the other factors come into play, which involved his decommitment. Like, hey, Texas hadn't produced, he's hearing from other coaches, Texas hadn't produced these, types of players in the first round. You can go here, go here. And then that actually comes into play. And I think the next step of this process is to see what this team actually looks like in the fall. And if this team looks the way that Sark is selling it to recruits, then I think you start seeing these guys like Stewart, maybe not in this class, but those players start to see where what's on the field matches what they're hearing from the coaching staff. Because right now, all they have to go off of is like, well, this is what you did at Alabama, but that's Alabama. And you can, Sark can pitch this and pitch that, but until they actually see it on the field in the fall, and that's why this class is going to be so interesting for me to kind of wrap this all up, is like, they're in on some really elite guys, but we had a pandemic. They're just getting on the campus. There's all these like fascinating factors that are coming into play, and they haven't seen this team on the field yet and how they've developed and what Texas football is going to look like in 2021. So
yeah, I think you bring up an interesting point. Just one last thing to kind of hit on for me is Quinn Ewers. had that was like an interview or something the other day where they were asking why elite prospects leave the state of Texas, and him being the Ohio State commitment, just that it's all about development piece. That's all you ever hear about. And so I thought it was interesting that Brennan Thompson, one of his family member on Twitter, which was kind of cool to see, was basically saying, well, someone needs to turn the tide. So I don't know if that means that Brennan's leaning towards Texas. That would be amazing because he is he's got world-class speed. He's a 10-3 guy. So that's Jamal Charles type speed. So, that's what the recruits are looking at. It's like, can I take a chance with, going to Texas? Because the history has said that it's not going to be, it's just not going to happen. So it's just going to take the turning of the tide essentially, and getting a couple of these guys on and then making something out of them is the way you really turn around recruiting for the future. Yeah,
for sure. It's going to be an interesting year. This is going to be a fascinating class to watch play out. So, and then we got 2023, and we can talk about Arch Manning and all that fun stuff at a later time. Well, guys, do we want to hit on basketball real quick before we call it, or what do you think, Jay?
Real quick, I just wanted to mention, let's talk about basketball real quick. We had a transfer in from Texas Tech, actually. Avery Benson came over. He's coming with Chris Beard. Quick thoughts on Benson and what he can provide, Mike?
Our favorite term right in the group chat. It's a glue guy. Just a tough-nosed player. He obviously knows Beard's system, so I think he'll fit in seamlessly. I think a big piece of the puzzle here for Beard is going to be gelling all these guys. You've got a lot of talent. I mean, it's top 20 talent on this roster right now, especially if you can get, maybe Mahoric in here from Illinois State. And Jericho Sims is the key piece. Like, if he comes back, and you're looking at huge expectations. So we'll see how that happens. But, it was not surprising to see Benson come over. I was actually surprised to see maybe not a few more come over. But I think the new coach at Texas Tech did a pretty good job of reselling the program. He is an alum there. So I think he did a pretty good job doing that. But I think Benson's just a quality, tough-nosed kid. Fits right in with the Brock Cunninghams of the world. You need some of those guys going into the tournament.
You do.
Hell yeah.
You
can never have too many.
No, glue guys all around. Give me. Well, no, I was gonna say, don't give me 12 glue guys. I don't need that. I need like 2 maybe on a team. And then last thing I wanted to bring up for basketball, we had Keontae George was on campus this weekend, number 6 overall player in the country here. His first official visit was actually he decided to take it at Texas. So real quick, any thoughts on Keontae George and maybe anybody else that is coming in to take a visit?
Yeah,
Kerry, your mic.
Oh yeah, I mean, just real quick. I mean, this is the time to sell the new arena. What a great selling point for Chris Beard going into this recruiting class. So I think we'll see if that's really going to play a factor, because that thing looks really nice. Obviously getting it to be finished up here soon. So no, I just think it's great. Anytime you can get top 10 prospects, that's only going to make you better. So look at all the powers of the world. So Kerry?
Yeah, I just on Keontae George, my real question here for Mike is just like, how legit, how realistic of a shot is it to get him into this, into the class and actually committed and all those things? Because it's great to have these, I think Chris Beard's got a good enough relationship with players around the country to get them on campus, but how much of an opportunity does he have to close this one out?
Yeah, no, I think it's real. It's real. I really do. So he was looking at Tech before Chris Beard left, and I think you see some of the guys that Chris Beard's been able to bring in transfer wise. He's a great recruiter. So I think if you can get one of these guys, and Texas really hasn't had an issue getting elite level talent. A lot of high draft picks, and so we'll see what's going to happen. There's still a long way to go, especially with the dead period being over. You're just going to hear so many things, and that's just kind of where we're at right now. So we'll see what's going to happen.
It's rumor season.
Love it.
Buckle up.
Love it.
Well, guys, unless we got anything else, I think we can probably call it there. Mike, it's great having you back on, man. It's been too long, and have you back soon, especially as this June to remember, hopefully a June to remember ramps up. So.
Awesome,
man.
Thanks, I appreciate you guys having me back on, man. Always love talking recruits.
Yeah, man. And we got hopefully some super regional action to discuss next week. So, let's finish the job this weekend first. But
let's go 1-0 today. Just
go 1-0 today, and we're fine, and we're
let's do it
onwards. So, well, guys, it's been fun. Let's do it again soon, guys.
All right, thanks for listening. Peace.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you.
ATX represent. Fatal, baby.
All in 06 on a Saturday. Can it drip and swing a